I'm joined on the Crispin Flintoff show by Fahad Ansari. How are you doing, Fahad?
Hi, Chris Ben. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well, thank you.
The reason that I wanted to talk to you is that this story in The Guardian, a lawyer who brought a Hamas case claimed he was unlawfully detained by police. And it says you're launching a legal action against UK Home Secretary after your phone was seized at Holyhead Port. Um, Now, we've featured on this show people who have been stopped. We've had Asa Winstanley, whose phone and everything was taken when the police came to his house. This is really unnerving because you're a lawyer. Can you tell us what happened when you got to Holyhead?
So I was coming back in August this year from a family holiday to Ireland, where my mum still lives. So I had my wife and the four young kids in the car, and we came back via Holyhead. So we'd been driving in the car from Galway since about 10 a.m. that morning. By the time we got to Holyhead, it's about 5:30. uh, Police officers, four of them suddenly came out at immigration and stopped the car. From what I could see, mine was the only car in my vision that had been pulled over. They asked me for my passport. They said, we're doing a stop for national security. I said, okay, that's fine. They gave me the landing card, which is a Schedule 7 card, which is the normal procedure. And you put in your details on it. You mention what your occupation is. I put down solicitor. I gave it back to them. In the past, where this has happened, when they see solicitor, they just wave you on. On this occasion, they brought it inside, and another officer came out, said, Mr. Ansari, we need you to come in to ask you some questions. So I went inside with the officers. I sat down. They told me you're being detained under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act. Under Schedule 7, it's a suspicionless power. It allows anybody to be stopped at a border or port to the UK without suspicion, and they have to answer questions, and they have to provide their devices, and they have to be searched. Willfully failing to comply with any of the above that I just mentioned is a terrorist offense, and you could be actually arrested for that. So normally they have this sort of period where they examine you to assess whether they want to detain you. So when I asked him, "Are you examining me?" he went straight off, said, "No, we're detaining you. We're going straight to detention," which I found quite puzzling. I didn't have my phone on me, and then one of the officers went out to the car and came back with my phone. So he'd obviously gone to the car to seize it. He came into my phone in a pouch, and he says, "We're seizing this device in accordance with our powers." Now, at that point, I immediately told him, "Look, you know I'm a solicitor, and that phone is privileged material. That's my work phone. It's got, my client-sensitive data, communications, emails. You cannot access that." And they insisted they were able to do so because they have a procedure where they'll instruct a barrister to examine the contents to decide what's privileged or not. So I said, well, how do I know which barrister this is? Are they involved in any of the litigation that I'm involved in at the moment? Have they been involved in previous litigation? Or how do I know, how do they know who my clients are? I mean, if you're searching through my phone to check what's privileged, you can only do so if you know the nature of my cases, you know the names of my clients, you know what kind of search terms I would have put in researching for their cases. And I explained to them, look, I specialize in national security cases, as you are well aware, and you seizing my phone in these circumstances seems completely unlawful. They refused to listen. They said, we're going to seize it and we need your passcode. So we had a bit of a back and forth about whether I should give them my password, and I said it's privileged and I don't need to give it. When they were insisting, I sort of took my right to contact a solicitor at that point. So my solicitor came on the phone and she explained the same thing, that it's privileged material. They were not interested. Now, as I said, if you fail to give the passcode, as has happened to other people in the past, it's a criminal offense. You could get convicted of a terrorism offense for failing to give your password in those circumstances. So under that sort of compulsion, and knowing that my wife and kids were in the car 7 hours from home, I gave the password. At one point, I actually said to them, I said, look, my family in the car outside, they've nowhere to go. We've got accommodation booked in Wales. We're 7 hours from home. It's the evening. Can I just give them the details of the accommodation? Because I had it on me, so they can at least go home. And they flatly refused, said, no, we can't do that. Which again, I thought was part of their just trying to have leverage over me with this, that knowing that I'm aware of my family in the car. Now, my son is neurodivergent, so in my head, I'm thinking, how is he actually dealing with all of this? And they were aware of this as well because my solicitor had told them. Anyway, once they got the phone, I thought, okay, that's it. You've got access to my phone. They also made me disable Face ID, which again, they said I had to do it. If I failed to do so, that's willfully failing to comply with their search. Um, so I thought, that's it now. You've got my phone. Let me go. No, no, we need to ask you questions now. And remember the power. The power is there to establish whether somebody is involved in terrorism. That's the only reason they can ask you a question or seize your devices. So they began asking me questions of the most ludicrous nature. They asked me all about my social media accounts. They asked me about what I was doing in Ireland, even though they had my Irish passport at that point. What degree did I do at university? I'm a solicitor. You can take a wild guess what I did. What my A levels were. And I stopped them at that point. I said, look, this is really ludicrous. You need to establish if I'm involved in terrorism today. And you're asking me my A levels over 25 years ago or plus, right? Where's the connection? They asked me about my hobbies, what kind of books I read, which mosques I attend, how often do I attend a mosque. And they're very insistent on this, knowing, well, is it 5 times, is it 3 times, is it 4 times? And I'm like, it varies, it depends. I'm not like rigorous on it. And, it might be zero one day. But they were very, very insistent on knowing this. They wanted to know who my friends were, who I socialized with, where I socialized, who my best friend was. So those are very weird questions. And I think this was just a warm up. Now, interestingly, after each batch of questions, the examining officer would leave the room and then come back in and with some more questions. So for me, I was like, someone's feeding the questions in the background. So I'm just observing this. He then asked me the political questions. What do I think about what's happening in Gaza at the moment? What's Israel's end game? What should be done about it? Do I attend protests? Which protests? When? How often? What products do I boycott? I mean, how is this determining if I'm involved in terrorism? And then he'd leave again. So once when he left, I sort of said to the other officer, we just had a bit of a banter and developing a rapport. But he was trying to develop a rapport with me. I was doing the same thing with him, trying to find out what's going on here. So I said to him, I said, look, I go, sounds to me like a bit of profiling. And he goes, no, no, we stopped you for a reason. So I said, okay, well, are you going to tell me that? He goes, no, we're not, we can't tell you. So then at another occasion, I said, your mate keeps going out to ask, to get questions, right? So who's feeding the questions? Is it MI5? Is it MI6? Is it Mossad? And he sort of looked at me and said, you've been doing the job long enough. You're probably not far off the mark. So again, to me, that suggested that the security services were behind the stop and were the ones who were feeding the questions. And then it gets more sinister because the officer comes back in again and they start asking me about my views on Palestine Action. What do I know any of its members? Do I associate with them? Do I know of any planned actions? Do I know of any meetings that are taking place? Have I attended meetings? Do I know of any mosques that support Palestine Action? My views on the ban and their legal challenge to the ban. At this point, I was just thinking, I have no opinion on any of these matters. And he said, oh, well, you must have some opinion. I said, well, I have no opinion in this room. I, yes, maybe I had an opinion before I came into this room, and maybe I'll have an opinion when I leave. But at that point, I have no opinion in these circumstances. So they just kept pushing along this. I mean, the officer even said, oh, my wife thinks the ban is ludicrous. I mean, I'm not a fool. I know what the idea is. The idea is to coax you into saying something that's potentially supportive of Palestine action and then getting arrested for committing an offense under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act, expressing a belief and opinion supportive of a banned group. And yes, I'm a solicitor, I'm in that circumstances. I can see the nuance and I can see the direction of questioning. Many people will not have that privilege and will engage in that dialogue and end up committing a criminal offense without even knowing they've done so because of the line of questioning that they're being asked by these officers without often without legal protection. So we have finished that trench of questioning. He leaves, he comes back in. Now I'm going to ask you about Hamas. So at that point, I said, look, I am not answering any questions about Hamas. As you are well aware, they are my clients. I'm representing them in proceedings in this country at the moment. So I'm not prepared to answer any questions about Hamas. And he says, you are confirming you will not answer any questions? I said, absolutely not. And I thought at this point, okay, he's probably going to arrest me. He disappears from the room. He comes back in and he says, okay, we're going to end the interview now. So I thought, okay, he's going to arrest me, but he didn't, thankfully. But it's just very bizarre. You know, you've brought a solicitor in, you've got my phone, which you clearly wanted, and then you're asking me about my clients. You know, even there's this weird moment where while they were trying to get my solicitor on the phone, they said, okay, we can fingerprint you and take your DNA swabs and photograph you, which we're allowed to do. So, you know, I said, okay. So they took my prints, photographed me, took my DNA samples. Um, and again, afterwards, I mean, I should have realized at the time, but I guess I was just a bit shaken at that moment. But this can only be done to establish the identity of a person. They had my passport. It was a targeted stop. The security services had informed them to stop me, as far as I could tell. Another reason I think it was targeted was one of the officers the one who seized my phone, on his hand, he had my car reg written on his hand. So clearly they were looking out for the car when they came in. Yeah, so that's like as bad as it got. So I got 3 hours almost of questions, finally released without my work phone. I got it back after a week. But in that week, they're so disruptive because of multi-factor authentication, I couldn't access my emails, couldn't access my banking, couldn't access anything because everything was going back to the phone to get the verification codes. So yeah, so now I've instructed solicitors to bring this challenge against them for what they did.
So just to tie something up, what happened with your family? Because they couldn't. There were 3 hours. Were they still there 3 hours
So
later?
they were just driving around, roaming around till I got released about 8 p.m. Then I came out. I got them to call them to come back, pick me up. Very distressed, understandably so. It meant the next few days of holiday wasn't great. It's like this overhanging sort of tension about what happened. I was dealing with my lawyers. I didn't have a phone, couldn't be
Yeah,
contacted in one
didn't have a
sense.
phone. Yeah.
But I mean, the next day, actually, now that you mentioned family, the next day, there's two issues with family actually, which are important. The officer at one point he asks me how old my children were, and again, I don't understand the relevance of that for you to determine if I'm involved in terrorism. So, but I sort of hesitated to answer, and then he goes, "Oh well, we have their passports anyway, so we can just get it from there." Again, it seemed to be intimidation. Then the next day, I don't have my phone. I'm driving, my daughter's next to me. She sort of says, "Oh, Dad, I just got a notification on my phone which says a parent is trying to manage your contacts." Now, the Apple Family program allows a parent and child to share a group so that parents can actually monitor their children's activities and access their messages, whatever. I've never used it myself, but there is a family on it with just me and my daughter. And I don't have my phone. So I'm not sure what's happened here, but it just seemed that whoever did have my phone in their possession was trying to manage or access my daughter's phone. And that really spooked her. She was really, really upset because she thought, are they looking at my pictures? Are they looking at my contacts, my messages? You know, she's a child. She thought, and so she took a screenshot, which we kept for the case anyway. But it is quite chilling because, I mean, people have asked me, why do you think it happened? And just speculating, I can see two reasons. One was an attempt to access confidential, privileged client data. And secondly, it seemed to be about intimidation and harassment because of the nature of the work I'm doing.
You said that you were used to being stopped for Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act. Can you tell us more about that?
The Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act came in 25 years ago, and it allows police officers to stop anybody without suspicion. You know, you need reasonable suspicion to arrest someone. Here you can stop them and hold them for 6 hours and question them and search them without the need for any suspicion to establish if they're involved in terrorism. In practice, it has largely been used against the Muslim community. Tens and thousands of Muslims every year are stopped at borders in this country. and subject to this. There's no sort of standardizing age. Elderly people, people in wheelchairs have been stopped. Uh, young people, 18 to 24, they've been stopped. Adults, it's just standard. And we all sort of have this habit of giving ourselves extra time to go to the airport. Our devices normally, sort of, some people will wipe the devices before they travel. Some people will take a travel phone. We have to put in all these measures because to protect our own data and protect ourselves. You know, as it was, I didn't expect them to stop and take my work phone at any point, but that's what's happened here. But generally speaking, we all allow for it. People go through it every day. I'm not unique in that sense. I think the unique part of my case is that I was targeted because I was a solicitor dealing with cases against the government. And I think that's sort of the real development here. Schedule 7 is horrific. I mean, it shouldn't be on the books at all. We've been calling for it to be abolished for a long time now. Um, can you imagine that nowadays with a device, if you were to go into my house, you would probably find less information about me than you'd find on my device because and yourself as well, Crispin, it's probably the same. The way devices are nowadays in terms of your photographs, the metadata saying where you were, if you've got an Uber app, you can check which places you've been to, your Google Maps, your contact list, everything is on there, right? So you could just by looking at all that data, you can find out so much more about a person. Especially nowadays with AI, you can plug it into AI, you can do a whole profile about somebody, where they've been, their contacts, what they do for a living, where they go every day, their medical history, all of that. You won't find that in a search of your house. So the fact that the police need reasonable suspicion to come to your house and a warrant from a magistrate, but at an airport they can just take your phone and without suspicion copy everything on it. That should be chilling for everybody. And now you have, Mr. Starmer talking about compulsory digital IDs for everybody in the country. It's quite chilling the direction the country has been moving in for some time now,
I mean,
without
what
any.
you're being stopped and your phone being seized and your list of clients as a lawyer, the confidentiality you have, that is a massive issue here. I've read that it's the first use of Schedule 7 to seize a solicitor's phone. That's a massive story. It was in The Guardian, but it hasn't really been given a lot of attention. Can you tell us how you're challenging what happened to you there?
Yeah, so I've instructed lawyers to bring a judicial review, meaning we want a judge to review the decision to detain me and to seize my phone. And we've issued proceedings in the High Court against the police, the Commissioner of the North Wales Police, and the Secretary of State for the Home Department, Shabana Mahmood, because she's in charge of the policing in this country. And it's her policies that enable this to happen. Now, that's been issued. The police's defense essentially is, look, we've got a procedure in place. We'll instruct a barrister. They will check what's privileged and what's not. So therefore, it's not unlawful. But if you try to think about it this way, if you think about a jigsaw piece, right? A giant jigsaw puzzle, this is your phone. It's, the confidential data are these small pieces that are spread across apps, photos, chats, searches, files. And imagine that jigsaw piece just falls on the floor. Now, this barrister is going to come in and pick up a piece and have no idea where it goes. I'll see that same piece and I'll know that's a photograph from X case or that's a search term which was used for Y case. They might pick it up and say, oh, wow, this looks interesting. This could not possibly be related to one of his clients. And that's something the police should be able to see. So they won't know which pieces are legally protected or how they connect to one another. And then there's files that have hidden data like location tags and photos, which can reveal where somebody was when it was taken, which again could compromise the safety of many of my clients. A lot of my clients have anonymity. To enable the barrister to check what's privileged, I have to give their details and breach anonymity. I can't do that. And this is like going across 15 years of clients, witnesses, family members, trying to compile all those names together, put into a list with the search terms of each case. And it's a career which I've spanned over 4 or 5 different firms, getting their buy-in, their consent. It's just not possible. So we're challenging that, and we've issued proceedings to the High Court. We've also sought what's called interim relief, meaning that we are insisting that nobody, not the police, not the security services, not even this barrister, are allowed to access the material until we've concluded this case, because the prejudice to me and to my clients is significant. There's no urgency. They've already had the phone for 2 months and they haven't started this sifting process. So there's no, like, unless they're claiming that there's some massive like bomb about to go off because they have because of my phone, which they haven't. But there's no reason for them to actually proceed, and they should actually have given an undertaking. And that's what we said. We said, look, just promise you won't look at the phone until we've actually concluded the case. There's no reason why not to, and they refused to do so. So we're hoping to have a hearing probably early next week on this issue at the High Court. And if the judge orders that they are not allowed access, that would be a success for me for at this stage, because it means that that data is preserved and is kept confidential. I think that we have strong merits of succeeding in the case. I certainly have a very strong legal team, and they're all very confident about the merits. As you said, Crispin, it's not the first time a solicitor's phone has been seized in this manner. It's the first time it's been targeted in this manner. So, for example, I'm aware there's other people who've been stopped and their devices seized, not because they were a solicitor, because it's incidental to it. But here, this is clearly targeted at me for this reason.
Do you think the police or the security services behind them are concerned that your case could overturn this prescription? Is that partly what you think is going on, or what do you think is actually happening?
I mean,
when they did this, have
I
you
don't,
got
I don't
any
want to,
reason?
I don't want to speculate about that aspect, because the case is strong as far as we're concerned. Obviously, we're representing the organization, and we think the arguments are very strong. And that's something that the court will now decide. What I do believe is it's an attempt to intimidate and harass, so that it's not about me, it's about other lawyers in future will be unwilling to take on these cases, whether it's Hamas or anybody else who the state determines is unworthy of representation. And that's the real concerning part, because this is designed to take the right of Hamas, the legal right Hamas have to fight their prescription in court. This is something that Parliament provided for, that was designed to be mitigation against the potential abuse of the prescription power, saying it's so draconian that organizations who are prescribed should be allowed to challenge their prescription in court, and to that extent, they should be allowed to have lawyers to do so. What's happening here is, I could imagine if people see, okay, look, the Hamas lawyer is getting basically stopped by the police, he's being smeared by politicians, he's getting intimidated this way, they're going to be very reluctant to take on the case of Hamas or people worse than Hamas going forward. And that's the real concerning part for me, because there is a right of representation. We do live, or we're supposed to live in a democracy with the rule of law and due process, but those rights are being stripped away bit by bit.
Now you have a crowdfunder. Obviously, it's going to cost a lot of money to take this case. As you can see, there's 21 days to go. You've still got quite a way to go. So I'm going to put this on the video that comes out of this. I hope people can support you in this. It's important that you get enough support for this, because it's obviously going to be difficult. How hopeful are you that you'll win this?
I'm quite confident that we will. I mean, if you look at it in a purely principled approach, the police were aware that this phone may have had like 2 to 3% personal communications and photographs on it, but they were fully aware it's a confidential phone. In terms of my work-related activity, I'm hopeful that a judge will see that for what it is, and not be distracted by the smokescreen that's inevitably going to come about, my political views. I'm not naive. I know the government is going to sort of play that card, but this isn't about my political views. This is about client confidentiality and a principle which, if I lose this case, it's going to render every solicitor taking national security cases put them in a less favorable position when they travel, that they too could be stopped in this way and intimidated and harassed. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're used to seeing, and which the British government and the Law Society call out in other countries. And yet it's happening here. I was in Geneva on Monday, speaking at a side panel meeting at the UN Human Rights Council. And I also had the opportunity to speak privately with the UN Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers. And her and other people that I sort of met in Geneva were absolutely appalled and shocked that this was happening in Britain. They could not believe it, and they're recommending for the Special Rapporteur to make an intervention with the British government about this case. Other lawyers are at the moment rallying around Europe to issue letters and statements in support of me and support against what's happened. So I think it's going to be a tough one because it's going to mark a major blemish on Britain's record internationally if I were to lose this case and that confidential data was to be accessed by the police and the security services. I mean, another level of this you have to check is that people give you that information out of trust, that it's not going to be disclosed to the other side, to the government, to the police, to security services. And that's because it's in the context of legal proceedings. It's already a struggle to convince people who've lost their citizenship, who have been excluded from the country, to fight these cases on the basis that, look, there is a chance of winning. We need to actually fight them. And all this is going to do is going to deter people from instructing lawyers to fight these cases. So you're undermining the entirety of your legal system where people don't have trust in the system because they realize they can't even trust that the information they give their lawyers will be compromised in this way. So there is a deeper fundamental problem that is going to rear its head if I were to lose this case.